Shift Happens podcast.
Welcome back to Shift Happens. Today's guest is Travis Hann, co-founder and managing partner at Pender Howe, a firm specializing in leadership recruitment and talent advisory across industries, including technology, healthcare, social impact, and professional services. Travis is also a board member at Kestria, the world's largest alliance of boutique retained executive search firms operating in over 40 countries in 90 cities worldwide. With years of experience advising boards and CEOs on senior leadership hires, Travis has a front row seat to how technology, and especially AI, is reshaping the talent landscape. In this conversation, he shares why AI is a game changer for identifying talent, but can replace the human ability to assess fit, character, and culture. We also dive into the rising cost of executive mishires, the emergence of hybrid leadership roles that blend people and technology, and why storytelling, humility, and curiosity have become non-negotiable traits for today's leaders. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Shift Happens podcast, and we're so excited today to have Travis joining, and we're going to unpack this big conversation around AI, talent, recruitment, and what's the future of work look like. So Travis, welcome.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Dux.
Well, before we jump in, we always ask our guests this first question. What song best describes the change and transformation we're going through these days, and why'd you pick that song?
I chose "Eye of the Tiger" by Survivors. So for the Rocky fans, that one will hit home. And it's funny, it's that type of song where, to me, anyways, it brings me of you don't know what's around the corner, right? And I think in transformation and in shift, no one has that crystal ball to know exactly what's coming around the corner, and that's what that song makes me think of. It kind of puts you in that fighting mood, right? Maybe it's the Rocky movie or not, but in business and change, you kind of have to be a bit of a fighter, and that's kind of what that song brings me back to.
Yeah, there's a part there, right? It says, so many times it happens too fast. You trade your passion for glory, but don't lose your grip on the dreams of the past, right?
That's it. And I think where that line of that song brings me back to is don't get comfortable in business, right? There's so many organizations that were amazing but got comfortable, right? And didn't innovate. And a saying I always say in business is innovate or die. And it's such a true saying now more than ever, as we're seeing with the different solutions and products coming to the market, is you better be prepared for whatever tiger's around the corner, I guess.
You know, I think about AOL, Netscape. There's a whole lot of other companies, but you're exactly right. Especially now, everything's happening and moving so fast.
That's right. So it's a great song to kind of put it in picture.
Now, speaking about Rocky, just this quick trivia. You know, this song was actually commissioned by Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, interesting.
Because when they were making the movie, he actually wanted another song, Queen's "Another One Bites the Dust," for that scene, but Queen said no. So Stallone just called up Survivor and said, "Hey, can you create a new song?" And this was the song, which is really cool.
It's iconic now.
Amazing.
Yeah,
that is fascinating.
Well, you're talking about transformation and change. You know, I think about us. We're a 21-year-old company, and Mario, you've been here for a while, and things are just moving so fast, and it's getting faster. You know, thank goodness our business is doing good. We're growing around the world, and we're hiring people. We already bought some companies, and I think about, especially in your line of work, right? Part of it is, at the end of the day, for us, even we're a software company, it's all about people. And now we're really thinking through how do we best not only maximize the talent we have with these new technologies, but also really go after the next generation talent. So I know you're going to talk more about that, and I don't know, Mari just reminded me of our conversation in the past few days about scaling and growing.
So Travis, Dex and I were talking about how AI's ability to reduce search time and helping identify candidates with specific skill sets, how that's becoming much more interesting, and you're screening thousands of candidates and within seconds, right? And so, I was reading some of the articles, and one of the things that they talk about is they emphasize the importance of this idea where you have gentle leadership, for instance, in a cultural fit. And I'm curious, how do you reconcile the efficiency gains of AI with deeply human, aspect of leadership assessment? And where do you see the irreplaceable human elements in executive hiring?
It's such a it's such a good topic today, and my saying on that, Mario, is AI can identify, but AI can't qualify, right? And yes, has it made our jobs easier in a standpoint of being able to generate a long list of viable candidates to go after quicker than if we were having this podcast 5 years ago, for sure. But that doesn't mean it can tell you that this is the individual you must hire. Let's cut out all the nonsense of the search process and the assessments and the due diligence, and let's go. So it can identify, but it can't qualify. And if I think back to the last decade of doing this and all the executive leaders that I've disqualified from a process, it's for all the reasons that AI would never be able to put a finger on, right? It's showing up late to meetings, or it's sloppy communication between the process and the meetings. It's how they treat a waitress or a waiter at a business lunch, or a receptionist when they walk into an office, or have they dressed appropriately. And those all seem like very simple human skills, but it's shocking how many people can mess them up, right? And on paper, AI can very quickly identify who has done XYZ at company XYZ that we're all looking for. But the reality is our process on the tail end is intentionally very slow, right? The first 70% of our process is fast. And frankly, it's gotten faster due to the tools and solutions that we have at our fingertips. But we intentionally hit the brakes once we get closer to the finish line, right? And the reason for that is we want to make sure that we're hiring the right person. I mean, boy, people that think recruiters are expensive, I mean, they haven't mishired an executive before, because that is far more expensive than a fee of bringing a recruiter in, right? And it's just making sure that you do that due diligence. So I think, there's a great capability with all these new products out there to do our job in a much more appealing, stylistic way. But the reality is we're in the business of humans, and we connect humans to humans, and the person in the middle, hopefully is a human, right? Because they're the only ones that are able to put a really good pulse check on those individuals.
Very true. How do you identify the signs? Where do you see the early warning signs that a leader may not be adaptable in the work that you're doing?
I think, and I'll probably even, mention this a few times in the conversation, because I think what leaders look like today are a lot different than what leaders looked like 10 years ago. And I'm sure you guys see that within your own org chart and leadership team. And, a lot of it is a mentality to have success, in the C-suite these days. There's so many, I'm sure, up and coming capable leaders within your organization and other organizations who will never get that invite to the C-suite, not because technically they're not capable of doing the job, but it's perhaps they lack on the storytelling piece, right? Or that EQ component that really allows somebody to thrive in an organization and build consensus around a board of directors, or stakeholders or investors. And that's pretty hard to teach, right? Sometimes that comes naturally with experience and people click on. And I think that charisma when you're in a room with a leader is the component to answer your question. Mario, that's probably the piece that you look for, but it's incredibly hard to put your finger on exactly what that is, right? It's how does that person make you feel? And AI is incredibly brilliant. We use it every day. You guys use it every day, but it doesn't really make you feel that warm and fuzzy when you walk out of a room after having a chat with ChatGPT, right? So I think that's something that people have as a secret sauce, and reality is some people are better at it than others. So I think it's looking for that early on, Mario, to see, can this person take this organization to the next level by storytelling, by getting people bought into a vision, and creating influence.
Yeah. So maybe just one follow-up. I was just, as you were mentioning that, I was reflecting on recently, I was doing an interview for an individual, and I was traveling, so I had to do a sort of video conference interview. And, but I was fortunate that next week I would be in the office. So the person came in, I met him, and it was a totally different experience. That charisma came through. And so I do agree with you. I think that the human element, the side of human behavior that you don't capture or you can't get from efficiency tools, is so critical to the process. And I know Doug, you and I often talk about, when you meet someone, you get a totally different impression, especially when you bring them outside the realm of the business.
Yeah, I wanna kinda echo what Mario says, but also highlight the fact that what you said, Travis, it's like how they make you feel. There's you can't really pinpoint one thing on paper. Somebody may look good, but when you meet them, again, right? It's all these little things that add up. And in the 20, 21 years of this business and being part of the leadership team, I can kind of hone in now who could be a good leader, at least a good fit for this organization. I'm sure everybody's a good leader, but being a good leader is one thing, but also fitting into the culture of your organization is the other. You talk a lot about, I think about you talk a lot about this transformation, right, to general leadership from the from what used to be what we think of as leaders, like more of the machismo type, and I think this has a lot to do with the expectation and generational shift. Any thoughts or feedback on when today we look for these type of leaders, the gentle leaders, any specific cultural competencies that are becoming non-negotiable now in this new world for leaders in especially AI first companies?
Yeah. It's so hard to get a read on people, right? I mean, we're in the business of people and advising companies on how to hire and assess, but I always say our hardest hire is our own. And that shows you how difficult it is, right? Is even we have a hard time mastering it. Um, to give a really an answer to that question, I think it's a mindset, Ducks, right? I think it's an open mindset of a willingness to want to learn, a wanting to always find a better way to create things, and goes back to the Eye of the Tiger song. Is there that innovation mindset of always wanting to figure out how can we make the team better? How can we make the organization better? And some people don't have that, right? Some people are stuck in their ways of an older school mentality of this is the way it always worked. This is how I was raised and I learned the business. And that doesn't really fly that well these days, especially with AI or digital driven businesses. And I think back to when was ChatGPT launched? 2022, 2023 to the world, right? Like, yeah. And I remember watching the news one morning when it was kind of on and they were doing a little bit of a case study, like, look what this tool is capable of doing. And I had a meeting later that week with an individual and he said something to me like, boy, did you see that AI thing that's out? And the C-suite leader, right? Like, oh, that's such BS. That's never going to work. And no one knew at the time. I didn't know, and I kind of just shrugged it off and giggled at the comment. But the reality is that mindset of not wanting to even learn, or if you can bring that into your business to make it better, that's the big differentiator these days, right? That individual is on one side of the coin in terms of not caring to make change, and there's others who watched that news with me that morning and said, "Oh my God, if this is capable of doing what it says, imagine what we can do in the business," and the wheels start turning, right? So I think it's that natural sense of curiosity that makes good leaders great, and sometimes you can't really train that.
Yeah, it made me think of the fixed mindset, the growth mindset, right? And in fact, there's a news yesterday or 2 days ago about Accenture. I don't know if you saw this. Essentially, Accenture leadership says, if we have people who just doesn't want to learn AI, at some point we have to let them go, right? I mean, it sounds scary, but that's just part of this new world. And as you're describing the mindset, Mari and I talk a lot about this, is for leaders, especially here at AvePoint, we look for those that have entrepreneurial mindset, the ownership mindset. Gone are the days, especially in our business, like, oh, I'm the chief marketing officer. I'm just gonna swim in my lane. No, if Mario needs to go pitch and sell, he'll sell, right? Fortunately, Mario and I are technical. At some point, we have to demo code. We'll demo code. That's what it takes in this day and age. We just have to roll up our sleeves and take our organization, albeit it's not a small company anymore, but still take it as if this is our own business. How can we maximize? What do we need to learn? How can we grow? And not just get stuck on this is my job and it's not my job description, so I'm not going to do it. Right? We
Yeah.
can't think that.
It's a sense of scrappiness a little bit, and the way I say it to our team is we're focused on winning. We're not focused on always being right, right? And I think there's such a great sense of humility with really good leaders of exactly what you just did to describe yourself, Dux and Mario, is that great leaders wants to be surrounded by other leaders that are better at them than in other areas, right, of the business. I look at the best CEOs, it's the ones that sit around the table and they have HR sit at the boardroom table and they have their CTO and their CPO, et cetera, and they don't answer questions that they should be answering, right? And I think pushing that over to the functional domain expertise, without ego, I think that's really what separates great from good.
Well, here's a good question. You guys just prompted this idea. So I've been reading also about resilience at scale, and I think that resilience concept is it's a vantage point that can either help the organization, the individual, or the broader ecosystem. And that resilience is the adaptability you're both talking about, right? How do you transition? How do you have the growth mindset? I'm just curious, are you finding that in the work you're all doing that there is a willingness to think about resilience at scale and saying we're going to be more resilient because we're going to learn new technologies despite the mental models I may have had that have worked for the last 2 decades or 3 decades. I'm just curious how you're helping, I guess, different generations in the work you do transition so that they could stay relevant and they could actually, make an impact in organizations despite their, the generation that they are part of.
AI can de-risk decisions, right? I think that's one of the most powerful things that it has done for small business owners, for founders, for entrepreneurs. Um, Upskilling and reskilling, to kind of circle around your question, Mario, of how do baby boomers kind of reinvent themselves versus the younger generation coming out of school who may be more adaptable to technology and digital infrastructure. And business is a funny thing, right? I'm an avid sports guy, competitive sports guy. And if you kind of compare business to sports, business is the only sport where you play more than you practice, which is pretty scary, right? If you think about, I was watching the Ryder Cup last night, which was in New York, and the guys coming down the stretch, and if you saw their heart rate in the bottom left-hand corner that they were showing, their backs were up against the wall coming down the stretch, but they had practiced so much that putt felt like just another putt with their friends that no one else was watching. And I think the ability to practice that much in business is super important, and constantly read, constantly innovate. And for the older generation who sometimes I find are finding it more difficult to actually reinvent themselves because they didn't really grow up with all the tools that the younger generation are, it's critically important. And I think being around innovators and movers and shakers is important, but at the same time, like the entire bench of an org chart or an executive team, they don't all have to be mover and shakers, right? Sometimes you need those steady eddies that can kind of bring some of the old school mentality of thinking back to the table. And I think of ours is you can kind of go analysis paralysis these days of trying to bring every product and tool into your organization. And sometimes I look at our business and we're a younger search firm, but there's one individual on the team who's a baby boomer. And sometimes it's nice to have him in the room because he kind of brings us back to our basics a little bit and says, listen, it worked this way for 50, 60 years. I mean, we don't have to reinvent everything, right? So I think the balance is nice.
That is good. So, Dux, you were just in APAC and EMEA doing some events. How are you seeing some of what Travis is saying? Either a cultural also challenge that we see there across different geographies.
Yeah, so Travis, I was out in Asia 17 days, met a lot of customers, partners, and colleagues, and we did this roadshow of events around agentic AI, um, more thought leadership education. And one observation, a lot of conversations I had was I feel like out there, the perspective around AI is really very tool centric. And again, this is from all the conversations I have. I'm not saying that's the case today, but there's no conversation around leadership culture, right? And how AI impacts it. So in your world, in your view, in your experience, like through Kestria, you observe leadership trends across a lot of countries. So what are you seeing around the world, like beyond global, from an industry perspective? How are cross industry leaders being, bringing these types of perspectives, and how do they think about AI as it impacts leadership?
Yeah, the global ecosystem is interesting, and you're probably seeing that in your travels right now, Dux. And we're 41 countries now, 90 cities with Kestria, and I sit on the board of Kestria, so it's the world's largest executive search alliance of recruitment firms. And it's really funny to get us all in one room, right? Which we do annually. Last year we were in Budapest. This year coming up we'll be in Singapore. And it's funny because you're always kind of brought back down to earth on how little you know or how much you know, depending on what kind of room you're in at the time. And we had an AI discussion in Budapest where somebody was up on stage kind of talking about the different products that influence our industry, and just looking into the audience of 50 or 60 different people, you can see half the room like, yeah, we're already doing that, that's kind of old. And then you can see the other half of the room from other corners of the world like, oh my God, what? You can, have an AI agent that does your SOPs internally, and just mind blown. But others have been doing it for, 6 or 9 months or a year. So I think certain parts of the world are probably slightly more innovative, or access to knowledge and products and tools maybe a little bit more accessible versus other corners of the world. There's a couple of industries I would say that we're seeing more innovation or adoption to AI and technology, perhaps a little bit more than others. And I mean, one that wouldn't surprise you is kind of our software and technology clients, right? I mean, they're always kind of at the helm of innovation. But the other is our life sciences and our healthcare industry, which is a pretty strong focus for our firm. And I was interviewing a potential partner for our firm that specializes in that space last week, and he said it best. I said, looking at your resume, I can't tell, are you a technology executive recruiter or are you a healthcare executive recruiter? And he kind of bounced one back off me and said, if there's a healthcare company out there right now that doesn't also define themselves as a technology company, I don't want to be involved with them. And it was a really good kind of sense of almost all businesses are a bit of a technology company these days, right? Which is amazing. And it's not news, but it's good reassurance. So life sciences and healthcare, I mean, there's such a nice intersection of technology and drug discovery in the world right now that we're seeing, kind of firsthand, which is amazing. And, the APAC region, the EMEA region, we're all kind of speaking the same language, Dux, I would say, but perhaps, in Canada, we tend to be a few months behind what they're doing in Europe, and Europe's kind of perhaps sometimes following the APAC region. So it kind of runs around the world and we're all trying to chase the same thing. But I would say we're all, with innovation in mind, we're all trying to do our job a little bit quicker, a little bit better, but without also losing the human touch of what we actually do for a living, which is connect humans.
So speaking of the human touch, right? This is critical because more and more as this AI conversation, especially in the talent space, become front and center. How are you coaching or encouraging leaders to really solidify that factor of human trust and connection that AI can't replicate?
Yeah, it's we had a team retreat last year, and my team was probably mind blown because the year before I was coming into it with an AI digital push. Let's make our business as streamlined as possible. And then a year later, let's do everything in person. Let's bring it back old school a little bit, but also still leverage the digital infrastructure, because at some point, it becomes a bit of a distraction too, right? If how innovative can you create your business? And I think we did a really good job over the last 18 months of innovating our business, but we also have to go back to the basics a little bit. So for us, I mean, one of the non-negotiables, Dux, if we're working on an assignment, is putting eyes on every individual that we're assessing, right? And, fortunately, we're doing this virtually because, well, Dux, you're in a different part of the world. Mara, you and I are, a good plane ride away right now. And this is convenient, right? But in terms of truly assessing an individual and gauging them as a cultural fit with the organization you're representing, you have to do this face-to-face. Virtually works. Of course, sometimes it's easy, but if we're able to shake a hand and sit down for a lunch, it's a non-negotiable with our business that we'll do it. And the reality is we do that on the client side too, right? So when we're working with an organization, unless it's logistically impossible, we're going and walking the floor of that office or that plant or that factory or whatever that might be, because how are we supposed to be able to go out and represent them in the market if we have no idea what their reality is of where they actually work, right? So I think that part is important with all the different tools and solutions that are out there right now, Dux. I mean, you don't want to let those take over either, because they're not the ones that are onboarding or training or doing the 30, 60, 90-day check-ins, right? I mean, it's people to people.
Yeah. Actually, what you were saying makes me think about there's probably a widening gap in the companies that get the people strategy right and those that don't, especially as AI is coming into the organization. And I'm just curious, when you're helping either place someone or, help an organization find the right leaders, how do you reconcile that if the company is understanding that, look, if it's not just the technology and the AI pieces that you're doing as a business, there's a people strategy in the context of AI. Like, do you all think about that way? Do you help organizations make sure they're paying attention to that aspect?
Yeah, I think it's important. Who was the company? We just did an article on it. I think it was Moderna. Moderna was kind of the first to come to the market to combine the chief human resource officer role and the CTO role. I think they called it chief human technology officer. And I think that almost puts a twist on your question or gives you an answer, Mario, where human and technology kind of sit in one function these days, right? The human experience is digital. If you think about how many of the organizations are set up, we are, we're right across North America. We have little hubs where majority of our people sit, as I'm sure, maybe similar to your organization. The reality is magic happens when everyone gets in one room, right? And it's important to have a digital infrastructure to onboard people, to train people so that they can find your SOPs, et cetera. And you want to make sure that leaders that you're working with have that mentality, Mario, to really be able to grasp how an organization is set up. But I mean, we're even seeing org charts shift and change, right? I mean, I think the hierarchies on the lower level are flattening relatively quick, because you guys think of your first jobs at a university, they may not even be available now, right? I mean, if it was an analyst type of job or a data inputting job or something of that nature, I mean, it's a quick prompt on an AI agent and it's probably taken care of, right? So I don't see the flattening as much on the top of the org chart yet, quite frankly, in what we're seeing. But we're seeing amalgamations as Moderna just kind of came to the market of a chief human technology officer. I mean, that's quite fascinating, right?
This brings up a paper that I don't know if you saw. Microsoft every year puts out a paper called "The Work Lab: Future of Work." So the most recent one they came out is this concept of organizations eventually, if they want to be successful, they have to become a frontier firm. Now, what's a frontier firm? The idea of frontier firm is ultimately it's a mix of people working with AI. So imagine like a department. You'll have a manager, but then you'll have a couple people as team leads, and then you have agentic AIs as their team, right? So what you're describing makes total sense now, where the function of chief people officer or chief HR officer is not limited to people, because the reality of the future is you'll have a hybrid workforce where it's a combination of people leading and then AI doing a lot of the work, right?
The only thing that when I read that paper, the one thing that was missing for me was the empathy and vision. Because empathy and vision, right, is part of the overall landscape to make the frontier, be a place where people want to work and coexist with technology, for example, right? So the question is, where do you get that empathy? Maybe it circles back to Travis, what you were saying, which is that human-centered approach still necessary.
Yeah, I think it's important to still get people all in one room, right? And I think I said it on another podcast earlier this year where, I was working with an executive that owned a business, and he went completely virtual a few years ago, like a lot of companies did. And he wanted to bring everyone back into the office, as frankly, I kind of like that too, because I think magic happens when we're all in one room. And it totally slipped his mind. But the people that he had hired a few years ago were young grads that came out of school. He shipped them a laptop, a phone. They met up for lunch once in a while and that stuff. But they had literally never stepped foot in an office. They had no idea what to do, no idea what to wear, no idea where to park. And he was just like, oh my God, I created this, but I had no idea about the impact of it. And he had to almost retrain of, okay, we're going to come in, there's cubicles, we plug our laptop. So I think the mix of human and flexibility and innovation, like it's good to keep a little bit of a human touch, right? I mean, I'm sure you're seeing that right now on your travels, Dux. I mean, you're visiting clients all throughout the world, and you're probably getting way better interaction than what you would have gotten on a Zoom call, right?
Yeah, well, certainly, it's great. Also, there's a physical toll as well, but I take this over a Teams call or Zoom call. So definitely one of these days, Mari and I will come up to Montreal for sure.
You let me know also. I'd love to meet up with you guys.
I just think about it when you're describing this combination. Like Mario, you told me about Westworld, right? I have to watch that show, but it's gonna be kind of like that. Your robots with your AI, and then you have people in the mix.
It's going back to like disqualifying individuals for certain things in our process. I remember I flew into Toronto one morning to interview someone who was supposed to be a really promising kind of up and comer for our organization. I left Montreal at, I don't know, I was on the 6 a.m. flight out to go into the office for 8 a.m. in Toronto. It's a quick flight. And I was having lunch at 12 p.m. So I woke up in a different city than this individual. He was 20 minutes late to lunch, and I was 20 minutes early. And immediately it was disqualification. And just the lack of awareness that he knew I was on a flight at 6 a.m. to make that lunch, et cetera, and not have the kind of human empathy that you're talking about, Mario. It was a very easy way to showcase that something's missing that didn't fly with our organization, right? You wouldn't be able to see that on a Zoom call, which is important.
Well, that's the thing, right? I think it's And you mentioned it when you were given the example of a younger generation coming in without any context into corporate culture, behavior, and sort of the ethics of what that means. And it's a mixture of, and if we start thinking that, half my day I'm working with maybe AI and I'm having, a dialogue, an internal dialogue with AI, and then I have to go engage with, real humans. I think there's going to be a social, dynamics to this that some people are going to struggle with, and that's going to come down to over time, are these the right leaders for the organization? And so I think the empathy aspect of it, which is one of the traits that really can either make or break a leader over time, is one that gets sacrificed when you lean so heavily into enabling your entire organization with technology or AI. So what's the right balance? And then ultimately, if we use that concept of the frontier firm, is that the firm that's going to be outpacing its competitors, keeping the talent? All of these things are connected. Very interesting. I was just going to ask you both, if we were writing a playbook for executive hiring, what would be the first chapter in the AI era? Do you start with just the empathy piece? Do you actually go back to human elements instead of get right into it?
I think for me, it's call me old fashioned, but it's that first impression, how you make me feel, right? It's like going on your first date. You go on your first date, if this is the one or not, right? Or or you do another, or you're gonna swipe left. Uh, that first chapter is how you make me feel. Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, the AI piece is it's just a technical skill set, right? I mean, it's like if you're a CFO, I mean, you have to have a certain amount of financial acumen to do that job successfully. I think the AI understanding and the ability to use like digital solutions and tools is going to become just a necessary skill set to do the job. But I don't think that's what's going to get people invited into certain jobs. Like, if you have a CEO of an organization, their job oftentimes is storytelling and influence and being able to call a really difficult decision and get everyone on board and make those decisions and go to the boardroom table and actually make that announcement. And if they're incompetent of being able to deliver a storytelling moment, it's really difficult to get behind a leader and want to work on their team if they can't make you feel that warm and fuzzy excitement about what they're trying to launch, right? And I just read a book actually. It's the story on Hann and Blakey, which is actually a Canadian law firm that was the fastest up and coming law firm. I mean, there were upwards of $200+ million in a very short amount of time in revenue. They had offices all around the U.S. and Canada, over in Europe, and within the matter of a couple of years, they completely fizzled and went bankrupt. And the whole storytelling around why that happened was a change of leadership, right? A change of people not trusting the new promoted managing partner and two managing partners and who actually calls the shots, and just confusion on the team. And it naturally, forced their big rainmakers to start leaving, and it created a domino effect. And before you knew it, there was no more organization. So it's a really great book, and there's a lot of stories to be learned in that. But I think that's what it comes down to, right? Is people buy into people, and AI is just a skill set that people are going to be better at than some others.
Shift Happens Podcast. Shift Happens Podcast.
Well, boy, Travis, we can keep going, but I'm respectful for your time. Before you wrap up, to our listeners, any advice or suggestions or experiences you have that you want to leave with them with respect to looking at the next generation leaders in the age of AI?
I think just it comes down, Dux, to being open-minded, right? And I think that's natural for a global business in general. I mean, you're seeing it on the side of the world that you're on this morning. People think a bit differently in different corners of the world, and people that are perhaps a little bit more knowledgeable than others with certain tools are, more advanced than others. And I think just keeping an open mind of what's possible and doable out there allows great leaders to innovate and kind of thrive. So I think constantly having that willingness to want to learn is super important now more than ever.
All right. Thank you, Travis.
Thanks, Travis.
Thanks, guys. That was great.
Shift Happens Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to Shift Happens. A big thank you to Travis for sharing his insights on how AI is reshaping leadership recruitment and reminding us that while tools evolve, leadership is still about people, trust, and vision. Don't forget to follow or subscribe for more stories from leaders driving transformation around the world. Until the next time.
Shift Happens Podcast. Shift Happens Podcast.